Lord, remember me. I want to be remembered, don't you? Amen. Book of Nehemiah, chapter 13. A newly married bride was wanting to impress the in-laws, so she decided that she would fix a beef pot roast. All the fixings, taters, carrots, onions, celery, mushrooms. Man, it looked good. Spread was good. Table was full. Smelled good. Pa-in-law reached over there with his fork and he took a bite. He chewed. And 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 he could never get it to break down. So he slipped it under the table to the little dog to get rid of it. Maybe you've taken a bite like that before. Don't incriminate your wife. But kind of like that bite, the unfinished work, the never-ending work. We come here to the last chapter of Nehemiah, chapter 13. We like stories that end in victory. We like to see something win. We like to see I tell you, some of our movies today just don't have a good finish to them. We'll be watching one of those series on Netflix or something like that Nadine likes, and it's like the last episode just... And I look at her and I said, you picked this out? Now what am I going to do? I don't know what happens to Billy Bob. I need to know, does he live? Does he die? Does he get married? Does he go to space? I need to know the ending. I want to see victory. Nehemiah is a book that we wanted to see victory in. Nehemiah 6, or actually let me take it like this. If we go back to the book of Ezra, Zerubbabel builds the altar and they build the temple, and then Ezra comes along and they reinstitute worship and reinstitute the law, and then Nehemiah comes along and he builds the wall, and we want to see victory in all of this. Before Nehemiah 13, though, Nehemiah had left Jerusalem and went back to Persia, and he was there for some unknown number of years, and then he gets word that he needs to come back to Jerusalem. So chapter 13 is Nehemiah coming back to Jerusalem, and he's met with a sobering spiritual slap in the face. The wall's still standing. It's not broken down. The temple's still there. But something had crept in. The sobering lesson of Nehemiah 13 is this, that the work is never complete. It's a never-ending work. And if you own a house or a home this morning, if you own a mobile home or whatever you live in, you know what I'm talking about. There's always something to do. There's always something broke. There's always something that needs fixing. There's always something that needs updating. And listen, friends, I want to tell you this, that the Christian life is a never-ending work. Until we see Jesus face to face, it is never ending. There is always something to focus on and move forward. I want to share with you out of Nehemiah 13 that there's 3 constants in this continuing work. You can count on these. You can bank on them. You can put them in your pocket. You can hang them on your wall. 3 constants to the never-ending work. Let me just read a few verses of Nehemiah as we get started. Starting in verse 1, it says there, on that day they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people. And there was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God, because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So when they heard the law, they excluded all the foreigners from Israel. Now prior to this, Elishibib, the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God, being related to Tobiah. I'm going to stop right there, kind of getting ahead of myself. I want you to know this, that the first constant, the first thing that's never ending in the life of the Christian is the same thing that Nehemiah faced right here in the 13th chapter. Remember this now. They did all that purging. They had reestablished the worship of Yahweh. They had excluded the foreigners, and Nehemiah left and he went back to Persia. Now he comes back, and what he finds is this, that they had allowed Tobiah the Ammonite into the house of God. Look at verses 4 through 9. It says, now prior to this, Elishibib, the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God, being related to Tobiah, had prepared a large room for him, where formerly they put the grain offerings, the frankincense, the utensils, and the tithes of grain, wine, and oil prescribed for the Levites, the singers and the gatekeepers, and the contributions for the priests. But during all this time I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I have gone to the king after some time. However, I asked leave from the king, and I came to Jerusalem, and I learned about the evil that Elishibib had done for Tobiah by preparing him a room for him in the courts of the house of God. What had happened is that Tobiah, the Ammonite, the ones that were to be excluded, because when Israel was leaving Egypt and they were coming into the land, they didn't help their brothers. They didn't meet them with bread. As a matter of fact, they made war against them. So God did not allow them to be in the assembly. Here's a large temple room. In the temple, get this now, in the temple of God, an Ammonite has been allowed. They removed the things of God. They removed the contributions, the grain offerings, the frankincense, the oil, the wine, all those things that the priest, they took it out and set up Tobiah an apartment and let him live in the temple of God. How devastating is that? And here lives Tobiah the Ammonite in the house of God. It's as if we think of Tobiah, when we've seen him before, he was outside the city causing havoc. But listen, he's left the suburbs and now he's moved downtown. He's left the countryside and now he's living downtown in the house of God. The evil, the sin. I think, folks, that this needs to set into our minds this morning. I believe if there's anything that we should grasp today, it's that this needs to sink into our brains. That Tobiah, the enemy, wasn't outside making a havoc or a war. It isn't always a direct attack. And sometimes we look at those things. We say, man, Satan's really attacking me this week. My car broke down. My kids aren't acting right. The dog won't stop barking, or whatever it may be. We see that as a direct attack. But that's usually not how it works. Tobiah slipped in. He probably come into the city shaking hands like a politician. How y'all doing today? Hey, you look sharp. Those are some good tomatoes you got for sale. There's the best growing tomatoes I've seen in all of Jerusalem. Right there. That's a nice hat you have on your head. That's a pretty dress you're wearing. That's how Tobiah probably, though that's not in Scripture, I can see that's the way it's happening. He walked the streets. He shopped in the stores. He probably helped some people out. You need some help fixing that flat tire? I'll help you fix that flat tire. Let me help you jack that car up. Well, they didn't have cars. Let me help you jack that cart up. Listen, it's not always a direct attack. The enemy waits. He waits till leadership kind of softens. He waits till the infrastructure collapses a little bit. Standards soften. Diligence weakens. The Great Wall of China in 1644 was breached. That massive wall. They say you can see it from outer space. I don't know. I've never been, Jack. But they say you can see it from outer space. That Great Wall was breached. Not with a Sherman tank. Not with an Apache helicopter. But because of compromise with the gatekeepers. There, a general allow the Mancus army to come in unhindered and wage war in China. Friends, I want to tell you that's how the enemy usually goes about his business. He slips in unnoticed, and he waits till things softens up, and he begins to, kind of butter up to everyone and make everyone feel good. And then when those standards soften and those diligence weakens, then he begins to make his move. He quietly establishes a foothold. That's what he's looking to do. Just establish a foothold in your life and in my life. Like the vacuum cleaner salesman. He just wants to get his foot in the door. And you can't close it. And then he's in. He's introducing himself. He's telling you about his family. He's showing you his grandkids and great-grandkids and all that stuff. And, he's buttering you up. But listen, the same is true for us. Sometimes it's not a dramatic rebellion, but it's that things soften. I was at a gathering here recently in the past months of a once godly family in church, raising their little ones in church. And as I was there at that gathering, I'm thinking to myself, there's nothing about this that looks godly. All the activities were not godly. All the words and all the music, there was nothing godly about it. And those little ones that had been taken to church are now grown and probably hadn't been to church in years and years. And now they have little ones who had never probably been in church at all. And I'm just wondering, what's coming for the next generation? They'll be the generation that totally defy and reject God altogether. Why? Because the enemy was allowed to slip in. Soften standards, weaken diligence, and upend faith. A constant here is there is always an effort to upend the work of God in your life. Always. The enemy wants to upend God's work in your life. Maybe it just comes in tolerated compromise. This isn't so bad. This TV show isn't so bad. This place isn't so sinful. This relationship isn't all that bad. Just soften the standards, tolerate the compromise, neglected disciplines. I think that is one of the things that Satan uses to upend our life is we begin to neglect the disciplines of the faith. We neglect reading God's Word. We neglect prayer. We neglect coming together as God's family. And there, he gets his foot in the door. And he begins to butter you up, to watch you fall. Private indulgence. I've seen a lot of people fall. And you can trace it back to a private indulgence of some kind. They begin to indulge in this privately. And then pretty soon it upends their public life. It upends their marriage. It upends their health. It upends their witness and their testimony. It tarnishes their life. Because private indulgence. The goal is always the same. To upend your life. To tarnish you. To ruin your witness. If Satan can't stop you from talking, if he can tarnish your image where people don't want to really hear what you say, then he's won. If he can make you look bad, if he can make you fall, if he can make you slip, if he can hang some kind of blemish upon you to ruin your testimony and ruin your witness, then he's met his goal. And folks, Tobiah had slipped into the sanctuary. I believe that Satan wants to enter into our sanctuary, enter into our life. There's a constant effort to upend God's work in your life. This is a question to ask yourself today. Has He carved out a room in my heart that He's occupying? Has Tobiah carved out a room in your heart that he's living in? Satan, has the enemy, the world, the flesh, carved out a room in your heart? That room that you've removed God from, and now this is in there. Whatever it is, whatever it is. Maybe it is hobby. Maybe it is relationship. Maybe it is neglecting the disciplines. Maybe it is not being focused on Christ. Whatever it may be, is it carved out a room in your heart and it's living there. Listen, it takes us to the second constant. There is a constant that the enemy is always looking to upend your life, but there's always a constant call to cleansing. Look at verses 8 and 9. Nehemiah goes on to say, that was very displeasing to me. So I threw all of Tobiah's household goods out of the room. And then I gave an order that they cleanse the rooms. And I returned there the utensils of the house of God with the grain offerings and the frankincense. You notice Nehemiah's response. And this is where we need to take lessons. Nehemiah's response was immediate. And it was decisive. It was immediate. He didn't wait. He didn't put it off to a better day. He didn't say, you know, when I get this part of the temple cleaned up, then I'll worry about Tobiah and that. Immediately, he dealt with the problem. Immediately and decisively. He was not negotiating with Tobiah. He didn't say, well, maybe we can work something out. Maybe we could downsize you from this 3-bedroom apartment. Maybe we could put you over here in the back in this little 1-bedroom that nobody will see and nobody will notice. Nehemiah didn't negotiate with the enemy. Friends, there is no negotiation with sin. Sin in your life would destroy you. Absolutely and totally. There is no negotiation and compromise. There's no haggling. Some people have the haggling knack. You know what I mean? If I go to buy something, this is the way it works, Jeremy. If it's $10 and I go to haggle over it, I'll be paying $15 before I leave. But some people, they can walk up there and they'll be paying them to take it. Some people just have that knack. Listen, there is no negotiation with the master haggler because he wins every time. There is no compromise, no negotiation, no compromise. Chris Voss, there's a book out. Was an FBI negotiator, and he wrote a book, Never Split the Difference. And being an FBI negotiator, he would negotiate in crisis. You know, somebody's holding someone hostage, or you know, someone's attacking something or whatever. He would negotiate, and those guys are very good at their game. Listen, the name of his book is Never Split the Difference, because compromise, you never win. If you compromise, you never win. He actually says in the book, of course this is marketing or business, both people walk away losers if you compromise. But I'm going to tell you what, if you compromise your Christian standard, you walk away a loser. You walk away failing. You walk away missing the mark. You have split the difference with the devil, and you are left wanting and lacking. Never compromise your values. Never negotiate. He removed it without hesitation. Friends, I want to tell you this, that not only that, but he went and he cleansed the chamber. You notice that he throwed all this stuff out. You probably rode by some apartments, or you probably rode by some houses, or rental houses especially, where people are getting the boot, and all their stuff is sitting out there on the road. That was Tobiah. Nehemiah took his stuff and set it outside, and you're not coming back in. Friends, he dealt with it immediately, and he dealt with it decisively. And he cleansed the chamber. I think this is where this becomes deeply personal for you and me. For you and I, this becomes deeply personal. Is this, not only identify the sin in our life, but remove it. Remove the sin, the unclean, the unholy thing in your life. You see, and I've said this a lot lately, and this is maybe the pendulum my ministry swings on is this. It's not this one event that makes you Christian. It's that event and every event after that. There's not only salvation, but there's sanctification. There's not only saying a prayer and being saved, coming to Christ, but then there's being transformed, sanctified, made in the image of Christ. That is identifying sin and removing it and cleansing ourselves. Well, how do we cleanse ourselves? We come to the Lord. There at the tabernacle in the temple, sitting there before you would enter the Holy of Holies, was a wash basin. And the priest there would wash their hands to show that there was a continual cleansing that needed to be made. Because we're sinful people. Because we have things on our heart and things in our mind that we need to be cleansed of continually. Not only identify it, but remove it. And allow this ongoing purification to work in your life. That is the call of the believer. I mentioned this Wednesday night. Maybe I'm getting off subject. Maybe I'll make some of you mad. I don't know, but it'll be all right. These halftime shows at the Super Bowl. I posed to our men Wednesday night, can Christianity not find a better representative than Kid Rock? Can Christianity not find someone who stands for holiness and values and not vulgarity, not lasciviousness, not drunkenness and drugs? Can we not find somebody who stands on the blood of the cross to represent my Savior? Is that not who we are? I want to tell you this. I'm not saying anyone has to be perfect, but by George, you're sanctified. You're being made perfect. You're being made in His image. Being transformed into the image of His dear Son. That is sanctification, guys. And that mess they had on TV, the people who were up there, I don't know their heart. That's between them and God. But I tell you this, their activity, their influence, and what they project to the world, what they're projecting to. No wonder our young people are so confused. No wonder they can't get it right. Because the people being paraded before them are not worthy to be called by the name of Christ. I'm sorry if that upsets you. I just believe it to the bottom of my heart. We need, and I told our men Wednesday night, we need godly men and godly women standing on the platform of our world and our society who truly are being made holy in His image. Folks, that is revival in our world right there. Not, hey, you can do anything you want to do. Just mention the little Jesus. You know, they got this thing going around. Y'all probably seen them. Somebody glued one to my toolbox at work. And somebody asked me, they come by, they said, hey, do you have a little Jesus? I said, man, I got a lot of Jesus. I got Him all. But the big question is, does Jesus have all of you? Does Jesus have you and being made holy in His name? 1 John 1:9 says this, if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us of our sin and to cleanse us. That constant thing, to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. We don't go to a wash basin like the priests in the Old Testament. We come to Jesus. Lord, forgive me of my sin and help me remove it from my life and live a life holy and acceptable to you. That is the call of the Christian. Sin contaminates our life in three ways right here. I'll share with you real quickly. It clouds your affection. You cannot dabble with sin and have utmost affection for Christ because it clouds it. It clouds it. You can't go over here and have a girlfriend and your wife and love your wife like you're supposed to love your wife because it is clouding your affection. You're getting misguided. It's blurring what God has ordained. And friends, sin in the life of the believer clouds our affection for Him. I can't love Jesus like I need to love Jesus. I can't live for Jesus like I need to live for Jesus if my mind is clouded by sin. because it clouds our affection, but it also dulls spiritual sensitivity. You know, I say this, and some of you are going to get spooky on me, I know. But you can hear the voice of God. Not audibly, but you can hear God. You can, when we are spiritually in tune, we can commune with Him. We can know. We can know without a doubt where He wants us to go, what He wants us to be, what He wants us to do. But with sin in our life, that spiritual sensitivity becomes dull. And all of a sudden, we don't hear that voice anymore. We don't see that guidance. We don't feel that hand moving us because we're dull. But it also weakens resolve. Some Christians started out a good race. Some sprinted off that starting line with lightning speed. Like me in my 40s, I'm good for about 4 steps. In my 50s, okay. All right, honestly, almost 60. I'm good for 5 steps, and then that's it. I'm done. That's how a lot of Christians have lived their Christian life. They started out well, but sin crept in and killed their resolve. You know what resolve is? Resolve is that thing that makes us keep going. It keeps us at the task. It keeps us engaged. That is resolve. I am resolved no longer to linger. I'm resolved to live for Christ. But when sin creeps into the believer's life, resolve falls away because all of a sudden we don't feel like keep on keeping on. We don't feel like staying at the task. We don't keep our mind engaged because you know why? We're not resolved any longer. Maybe that should be the modern day Christian theme. I am not resolved any longer. Sin has tripped me up. Sin's contamination is like yeast in dough. It only takes a little bit. For you ladies who've made sour bread dough, you know this. You save a little bit. You save a little bit from this batch and you put it over here and it infects that whole batch. Sin infects the whole. Sin infects everything. You can't keep a little bit of sin in your pocket because in your pocket it will grow into your heart. It will grow into your mind. Sin contaminates the whole. Nehemiah didn't make other arrangements for Tobiah. He threw him out. Can I tell you this morning? I think somebody needs to hear this. You can't reorganize everything. Some things need to be thrown out. Some things need to be thrown out. Just like Tobiah the Ammonite and his evilness was thrown out of the temple, I guarantee you some of us this morning need to be at the altar, severing from our life something that's going on. Maybe it's some relationship. Maybe there's something in our mind. Maybe there's something in our habits or our hobbies, and we need to throw it out because you can't reorganize that in your life. You can't readjust it. It's time to get rid of it. It needs to be removed and cleansed. Some things cannot reprioritize. Last constant I want you to notice here. There is a constant effort to upend God's work in your life. There is a constant call to come to God, Christ for cleansing, but there's also a constant call to authentic worship. And verses 10 through 31 deal with this. I'm only going to mention a few verses, but it's 3 areas that Jerusalem had failed. Verse 10. I also discovered that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, so that the Levites and the singers who performed the service had gone away, each to his own field. What did they do? They neglected giving. They neglected. Now some of you tuned out right there. You thought he's going to talk about money. I'm going to tune him out and rerun that Bonanza episode in my mind. But listen, Giving isn't an easy thing to talk to because of that fact. But Israel, through the Mosaic law, was commanded to bring a tenth of their grain, a tenth of their fruit, a tenth of their wine to the storehouse of God for the work of the priest. But it was brought as an act of worship. An act of worship. That's what giving is all about. Whether it's giving your money, it's giving your time, it's giving your resources, whatever it's giving, it's an act of worship. You know, when you guys come and painted the room, that's an act of worship. You ladies went back there and made the bags for those women who can't come, that's an act of worship. When you work for the Lord, you give to the Lord, it's worship. The Levites had abandoned their posts. We got nothing to live on here. We're putting our feet to the ground. We're getting out of here. They had abandoned the work because no one was supporting them. You see, what had happened is worship became optional, not necessary. I want to tell you something this morning. Authentic worship is not an option. It's a necessity. You may treat it like an option. You may treat it like it's voluntary. But true worship is a necessity for your life. Just as much as oxygen is, just as much as blood flow is to your body, worship is a necessary function of the Christian. To not worship is to begin to fail. When we fail to worship through giving, whether it be monetarily, through work, through resources, if we fail to do that, usually our devotion is falling too. That just hasn't come to surface yet. They also neglected the Sabbath. If you look at 17 and 18, it says there that, "Then I reprimanded the nobles of Judah and said to them, 'Why is this evil thing you are doing by profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same, so that our God brought on us and on this city all this trouble? Yet you are adding to the wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath.'" You see, the Sabbath was a day that's set apart for the worship of Yahweh. They had failed on that. They had scrubbed the Sabbath. They had turned it into not only not a time of Sabbath, but a time of commerce. They were wheeling and dealing. They were selling fruits and vegetables and animals and all those things. The Sabbath was set aside for God. Holy time. Holy time. It's as if the holy time was treated as common time. Urgent, replacing the sacred. You realize this? That there should be some sacred time in your life. Sacred. That means not just to get dressed up and go to church. It means that this time is set apart for God. It's consecrated. It's His and His only. Sunday's just another day. Church when it's convenient and I don't have anything else to do, and when nobody's inviting me to go fishing or play golf or whatever it may be. Let me ask you this: are you neglecting what's holy? I know you're here this morning. We'll give you 1 star for that. But are you neglecting what's holy? What's God's? What's His Sabbath? Also, he neglected the standard. If you look at verses 23 and 24. It says there, "In those days I also saw that the Jews had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. As for their children, half spoke in the language of Ashdod, and none of them was able to speak in the language of Judah, but the language of his own people." This is not talking about mixed marriages of ethnic origin or racial prejudice or anything of that nature. It's talking about spiritual compromise. These foreign people were dragging the Israelites away from the worship of Yahweh to worship other gods. And that's the entire reason. It's wholly spiritual. Totally spiritual. He goes on to say there in verse 26, He says, did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin regarding these things? Y'all remember Solomon, right? 700 wives, 1,000 concubines. I mean, my goodness. He had to have a double-decker bus to go out to eat. A whole fleet of them. I'd hate to have his bill. But he couldn't control his insatiable desire for women. And I agree, it was probably most political. If I married this woman, she's the daughter of that king, then that king will be on my side. It probably had a lot to do with it. But listen, I'd have to really go into some details about Nadine that I can't share here. I don't believe I can stand 2, much less 700. Now, we're really going to see if she watches that Facebook. When I get home, if I ain't got knots on my head, we know she's lying. But listen, Solomon failed. He neglected the standard that God had set. He compromised. Compromise rarely looks dangerous. Satan doesn't make it look like you're going to fall off the edge of the earth if you get involved in this. He makes it look like you're going to have fun. Oh, man, this is going to be great. You're going to feel good. You're going to look good. You're going to sound good. On and on I could go. No. It looks reasonable. It looks beneficial. But then slowly and ever so slightly, the world slips through the door just like Tobiah did and begins to upend the work of God in our life. Authentic worship is not merely singing, raising our hands, dancing. It isn't some oozy-goozy sensation. True authentic worship is followed by obedience, faithfulness, separation from the world to God, and wholehearted love for Christ. Those 4 things are the foundation of authentic worship. If it's not creating obedience, if it's not creating an avenue for us to be faithful, if it's not separating us from sin, if it's not wholehearted devotion to Christ, it is not true worship. It is just something to show that we're going through. Nehemiah's motive is what ours should be today. The absolute holiness of God. That was Nehemiah's motive. He was abhorred because the temple was polluted. Nehemiah closes chapter 13. That's the end of Israel's history. There's no more recorded history of Israel. It doesn't close with fireworks, but with a prayer. Look at that last verse there in Nehemiah chapter 13. He says this, remember me, O God, for good. The wall stood. The temple stood. I think Nehemiah is asking for diligence to continue. Resolve, wholeheartedness. Church, I want to tell you this, the Christian life is not a one-time event. It's not saying a prayer. It's not going through a counseling or a membership class or anything like that. But it is an ongoing, never-ending process where we are continually being formed into the fashion of Christ. Lifelong diligence. The enemy desires to set up residence in your life. He does right now. He's looking through your want ads, and he's looking for an empty room. He's looking for a place to put his couch, his rocking chair. And there he wants to live and upend your life. You know, a lot of you are into gardening, I know. You go out to early spring and you get that spot all tilled up, Mr. Bill. Get that spot looking good. We plant, put out plants or whatever. In a few weeks, man, it looks good and plants are flourishing. And some would say, man, you've done a good job with your garden. But what happens about the end of June and July? The heat brings on the weeds. And it's a constant cultivation process. And especially if you live here in the South, the weeds outgrow everything else, and you're out there every day and you pull these weeds and you come back tomorrow and there's more weeds to pull. And the tomatoes are small, but the briars are big. But friends, our Christian life is that way. It's not that one time we get the soil tilled up We got to cultivate that all along. We got to continue to understand that the enemy is constantly looking to upend God's work in our life. We got to constantly come for cleansing before Christ. Constantly. We must constantly